This week, I am talking with Jeff Hawkins, or Jefferson Hawkins. He is a former Sea Org member and a marketing guru and someone who now makes his living at graphic design and marketing. But when he was in the Sea Org, which he had a very long history in through the 70s, 80s, 90s, we'll talk about when he got out and how, he had a lot of experiences, including one-on-ones many times with David Miscavige personally, and was also the guy over the very, very successful 1980s Dianetics campaign that I have spoken with on this channel with Jeff Levin in the past here. And I thought I'd get Jeff Hawkins' take on all of that, as well as a whole lot of other things. I've had sort of burning questions for him for a very long time, and it's been, as I was telling Jeff, a little overdue that I finally have him on my channel. Jeff, welcome to my show here.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and just for anybody who is completely in the dark or head in the sand in the ex-Scientology world, I mean, because most people have heard of you. You've also been on Leah's show. But when did you get in, and how did you get involved with Scientology in the first place? Just a quick summary.
I was living in LA. I was living in Sierra Madre Canyon, which is, I guess, about 30 miles northeast of LA. And some guys came up to the canyon, some FSMs came up from the LA org. They didn't even talk to me. They talked to a friend of mine. And then that friend came and told me about it. So I got it secondhand about this is what Scientology is all about. And the guy that came up to the canyon was Michael Maurer. Which
I've heard that name.
Yeah, some people will recognize that name. His mother was Phoebe Maurer, who was at the Int Base, lovely lady. Mike was about 16 at the time. But he was an FSM for the LA org, and he came up, very enthusiastic young man, and started telling people about Scientology. So my friend and I decided we want to go down to the LA org and check it out, and it was down on 9th Street near MacArthur Park at the time. And I tell you, it was such a different scene then than it is now. As we got down to this place, it was a big old 2-story craftsman house on 9th Street. And we went in and it was packed. The whole reception area was just packed with people. Young people, old people, all ages, every type of person you can imagine, all just talking and talking and talking, animated. And I thought, wow, to me, this was unusual, you know, to have all this mix of people, old and young, and just intensely talking with each other. And then we went into the lecture room, and there was 100 people in the lecture hall. It was
really?
packed.
100
yeah, it was 100 people. And they were getting 100 people every single night of the week.
Damn.
100. Yeah. And so we went in, we sat in the back, and the lecturer was a guy named Seton Thomas, old-time LA org staff member, and some old-timers will remember him. But he was a really good lecturer. And back in those days, they had lecturers who were really good. And now if you go into an org, not only is it totally empty, but they sit you in front of a video screen and you watch videos, because there is nobody anymore that can give an intro lecture.
That is exactly true.
Yeah. But in those days, a lot of people could give an intro lecture. I could probably still give a decent intro lecture, you know?
I think I probably could too.
But yeah, so this is back in the late 60s. Any Scientologist worth their salt could stand up in front of a group and give an intro lecture. That was not unusual. And Seton was very good at it. He was a good-looking guy, and he was clear. And he would explain to us what clear was all about. A reactive mind, and this is clear, and so forth and so on. And then at the end of the lecture, he would look each person in the audience in the eye. And he would go all around the room and he would say, I'm clear. You can be clear too. And everybody was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It was just kind of electric, you know?
Yep.
So I headed for the bookstore because I've always been a reader. And I got 3 books, took them home, read them all over a weekend. And then, you know, it was Problems of Work, Evolution of the Science, Fundamentals of Thought. You know, it was just the 3 short, basic books. Read all those in a weekend. I was like, okay, I'm ready. Let's go. And I went down the next week and I went to the bookstore and I saw a book up on the top shelf and it had a galaxy on artwork on the front. And it said, I think it was, Have You Lived Before This Life? Was one of those, or Scientology 8008 was one of those, right? And I pointed at that and I said, I want that book. You know, because I was all into the woo at the time. I was like, you know, past lives, yeah, tell me about that, you know. So I wanted the woo. I was like, yeah, give that to me. So he said, no, you don't want to read that book. That's an advanced book. And I said, no, that's the one I want.
Did he give it to you?
He did. He sold me several books. One of them was Phoenix Lectures.
Oh,
pretty
yes.
heavy.
Yes.
Pretty heavy. Anyway, I started reading Phoenix Lectures at home, and I felt sick to my stomach as I was reading some of the stuff about as-isness and da-da-da-da. So I went and threw up, and my thought process at the time was, wow, if a book can do that to me, there must be real meat to that.
Right.
You know?
Right.
You know? There must be some real meat there if a book can have that effect on me, you know? This must be the real thing, you know? So that was my strange thought process at the time.
I totally get it, man. You're not the only person who's told me that. And to be honest, I had the same kind of inclinations. How much of this do you think, how much of the you know, the woo thinking or the past lives and the spirituality and all that was, would you say was a sign of the times as well, or a product of the times you were in?
It was very much a product of the times. Because I was living up in Sierra Madre Canyon, which was an artistic hippie community at the time. They said it was the largest concentration of hippies south of Haight-Ashbury. Was in Sierra Madre Canyon. So there was a bunch of kids. We were all in our late teens, and everybody was into something, you know, whether it was I Ching or tarot cards or Ouija boards, you know, everybody was into something like that. People were reading Carlos Castaneda, you know, and I was reading books on yoga and all kinds of things, psycho-cybernetics. I mean, everybody was into something.
And, you know, I don't know that we should particularly even have a derogatory view about that. You know, I'm sitting here thinking about this going, you know, the kids they want to know, they're looking for answers, and school doesn't provide all of the answers to life and livingness and all of that. So of course they're going to be looking. That's not inherently a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people were following this guru or that guru, or, you know, this line of thought or that line of thought. So when I heard about Scientology, they had my attention.
You know, it's interesting. I'm actually just thinking right now about this. I'd like to get your comment on it. I'm reading a book called Intelligent Disobedience. And it's quite a good book. And it talks about, you know, how to be a good follower, how to be a good subordinate, how to intelligently disobey with orders that are immoral, incorrect, not good. And one of the points that is made is that school sort of sets up a system where you respond to and respect authority. That's one of the things it has to do, because kids are unruly and they don't necessarily know good judgment. And they, you know, you have to exert some degree of control over them. But then They get out of school and you haven't taught them when to disobey. You have not taught them when to think for themselves or when something might be immoral. And so the thing that got me thinking about this was when you said, a lot of people had a guru. And I thought, well, of course, because they would look for another authority figure coming out of school. What do you think about that?
No, I think that's very true. I think that a lot of that was going on at the time. People looking for an answer. And what's really interesting is that what impressed me about Scientology was that they had hardback books.
Oh, really?
And I was like, oh, well, then it's real. Because,
of course.
Because in those days, if it was in a hardback book, then it was cool. That was real. That was a real thing. And I saw all these hardback books, and I'm like, okay, well, it's legit.
Right.
It's got to be legit, which is interesting. That plays into the Dianetics campaigns later, because that's what Hubbard said. He said, you have to have books to make the subject real.
That's right.
And that was very, very real to me, because that had been my viewpoint when I came in. It's like, oh, if it's in a book, then it's legit. Nowadays nobody cares if it's in a book or not. I don't think. Maybe they still do, but
I think maybe there's a little bit more legitimacy given to somebody who takes the time to actually sit and write a book. As opposed to a blog or a couple videos or something. But I agree with you that there are certainly more a dime a dozen these days than they were back in the 60s.
Yeah. But that just lent a certain legitimacy to it. And I was also intrigued by Hubbard because of the way he was presented, which was, and the way Seton Thomas presented him, which was really as kind of an Indiana Jones character.
Really?
This explorer who went all over the world and studied different cultures. And he was kind of an anti-establishment character, striking out on his own, and I was like, oh yeah, good for him. And then he wrote all these books, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll read his books.
Of course they would position him like that in the late 60s. I mean, it was all about anti-establishment, and that was their target demographic was college age kids, young people in their 20s.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, okay. Now it wasn't very long. I mean, we don't have to go over, everything you've already, put in writing. You've written how many books?
3 now that are on Kindle on Amazon.
Yeah. Okay, good. I want people to know that. I'll put little graphics up of them as well so people can see them. I'll put links there. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, Counterfeit Dreams.
Yeah.
This is the main one. This tells the whole story of my 30 plus years in Scientology.
Yeah, and it is extensive, and there's a lot of very interesting, good information there. So it wasn't too long before you actually were all the way in the Sea organization, working at Publications. Is that right? Do I have that right?
At PubsOrg, yeah. I was looking for a way to contribute, and they used to send me the magazine from LA Org. And I looked at that, and I was working in commercial art at the time. I was a graphic designer in LA. And I would get this magazine, and I'd say, God, this magazine's a piece of shit.
I've seen some of those old magazines in archives, and they were pieces of shit.
They were pieces of shit. So I went down to the org, and I said, listen, I'm a graphic designer. We called it commercial art back in those days. I said, I'm a commercial artist. Do you need some help with your magazine? And they said, oh, yeah, we would love that. And so I went back into the DSEM thing, and I said, yeah, I'll help you lay it out, design it, and lay it out. And they handed me these shooting boards. You'd paste the local information on top of it and then shoot a printing plate off of it. It was photolitho. So I looked at the shooting board and I said, now I see where the problem is. So I said, where do these shooting boards come from? And they said, worldwide, in England. And I said, okay, I guess I got to go to England then. if I'm gonna actually make this look like anything decent, you know. And so, and they handed me some literature about Pubs.org, and they said these are the people that put the magazines together. So I said, okay, I got to go to Pubs.org and get this sorted out, you know. So
that's pretty serious about straightening these things out.
That was a serious step, yeah. So I did. With my brother and one other friend, we went over to England. We went to St. Hill. We could not find the Pubs.org because it had already moved to Edinburgh, Scotland. And nobody wanted to tell us that because they wanted to recruit us for St. Hill staff.
Of course they did. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
What year was this?
This was mid 68.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. So this is literally a year after, if a year after the Sea Org had even been founded.
Yeah, right. This was early on. Yeah.
Okay. So you made your way to Scotland?
So we got on a train, went up to Scotland, and I had a big portfolio of my graphic design work and illustration work, which, believe me, nobody ever looked at. You know, they didn't care. It's like as long as you're a warm body, you know.
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of familiar with how the Sea Org works on that front.
Yeah, Pubs wasn't even Sea Org at the time.
Oh, that's right. This was before the Sea Org sort of assumed that whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I went up to Pubs and I said, I'm a designer, graphic designer, and you know, like to help you guys out. And so I got posted to their Division 2, which was where everything was being put together, and started doing their own promotion for the Pubs.orgs, the book promotion, as well as laying out the magazines and so forth. And so, you know, I got to get my hand in on that, which was good. And I kind of stayed with that. Later in 68, we ended up moving the entire org to Copenhagen because the government was threatening to raid Pubs.org and confiscate all the book stocks, which is what they did in Australia. I think it was the year previously they had raided the organization and confiscated the book stocks. Well, this wasn't just the book stocks for England. This was the worldwide book stocks. So this would have been a major blow if the British government had taken over the book stocks. So we had 1 week, and we had to move the entire organization, and I think it was about 5 tons of books to Copenhagen. And so we didn't sleep for that whole week. We were just, you know, packing and getting it into these container trucks, which then were shipped across to Copenhagen. And then we set up in Copenhagen. So that's how we got to Copenhagen.
Okay, right. Which is where they still are.
Yeah, and they're still there.
Yeah, there's still the Pubs.org and all that. I mean, I think it's New Era Publications now.
Yeah.
But that is that's basically the publications organization for internal Scientology printing and all of that for all the world except the United States. And I think Bridge in the United States also covers Australia for some odd reason.
Yeah, not sure. I know they cover Latin America.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. They have an extension office down there.
I think Australia is still under NEP.
Okay. I could be wrong about that. Okay, fair enough. So you have a long and illustrious career going all the way back in terms of publications and working with Scientology stuff. Did you ever have any interactions with the old man during the time that you were working at Pubs directly?
Not until I went to the ship.
You went to the ship.
Yeah, there was a program at the time, which was the OEC FEBC program.
Right.
The org exec course and the flag executive briefing course. The idea was to train up this new generation of executives to boom Scientology. So they were getting 3 people from each org. One was going to be the executive director, one would be the org officer, and one would be the HAS, HCO area secretary. just kind of like
and
HR.
by the way, yeah, anybody watching this, don't even worry about all this nomenclature, because we're just going to throw around Scientology terminology, but it's not really super significant.
Right. Yeah, the HAS was like the equivalent of HR,
right.
Human resources, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And those were the 3 posts that were going to be trained, and every org was going to get these 3 people to the ship, get them trained, send them back, and then they were going to just boom everything, you know. So I was one of the 3 chosen to come from PubSorg, and I was supposed to be the organizing officer, the number 2. And my wife at the time, Christina, was the number 1 person. She was going to be the executive director. So we went to the ship, and Hubbard was supposed to lecture for the students. By the time we got there, the lecture series had already ended. So he never lectured to us, but I saw him around the ship. You know.
Did you interact with him directly? Did he know who you were, or did you ever introduce yourself or anything like that?
I had a strange interaction with him, which was I was trying to get to course. I was racing to get to course. I had to go up to our cabin, which was on A deck, to grab my books, and I was late to course. So I went and burst into the A deck foyer, which is just outside his dining room. And there was a flight of stairs that went up to his research room. So I come bursting through this door, and Hubbard is standing there with all of his aides, and they all turn around and look at me like, "Who the fuck is this guy?"
Right.
And Hubbard just looked at me and he said, "Well, hello there." And I just felt like I had just been, acknowledged by the king, Yep. He had given me his blessing, And so all of the aides then kind of relaxed a bit, and I went running off.
Damn.
I got in trouble for that, but
Oh,
yeah.
No doubt. How long were you on the ship?
That first time I was on the ship for about 5 months. That's how long the training took.
Wow. Okay. And what was your impression? Because you were not a Sea Org member, you were a staff member.
No, I joined the Sea Org while I was on the ship.
Oh, okay, good. Okay. So I guess then the impression of the Sea Org was a fairly good impression of the people on the ship and whatnot.
Yeah. I met a lot of great people there. Amos Jessup was there. He was one of the executives, and I'm still in touch with Amos, but great guy. And I met a lot of the students were really wonderful people too. Yvonne was there for the same program,
Oh, no kidding! You trained with Yvonne?
Yeah. I mean, we weren't twinned or anything, but I knew her, and we became friends on board the ship. So there were a lot of great people on staff, and there were a lot of great people that were studying there. So it was really good, and it ended up, I think, every single FEBC student ended up joining the Sea Org.
Huh.
It was the thing to do,
Huh.
And I got cornered by Sue Pomeroy, old time Sea Org member. She was in HCO at the time, and she called me in and she said, "What are you going to do for the next billion years? What are your plans for the next billion years?"
Oh, well, now that you ask.
Well, I was getting L's auditing at the time.
Oh, no shit. I didn't know you got the L's while you were there.
All the students did. We were the guinea pigs. We were the guinea pigs for the L rundowns. So I was running a lot of whole track stuff, So it wasn't an idle question.
Right.
It sort of meant something to me because I'd been running incidents way back on the track. So I'm kind of like, okay, what's my next billion going to be like? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do.
Well, Let me segue for, yeah, right. Let me segue for a second, because it's actually pretty rare that I have spoken with people here on my channel who have actually done the L's. The L's have never really, the actual issues and bulletins on the L's, as far as I know, have never leaked from the church. We have lists of commands and lists of procedures about the L's from memory from people who've left and wrote it down. But it's pretty complicated, and there's 3 of them, and they're big rundowns. There's a lot going on with the L's.
Yeah.
Could you comment on that a little bit as far as your experience with the L's, what that was all about?
Well, what I remember, what kind of, impinged on me is running whole track OWs.
Okay, meaning overts and withholds, sins, basically, wrongdoings.
Yeah, sins and wrongdoings, whole track, going back lifetime. Because Hubbard was saying, well, this is what holds back the power of the Thetan.
Okay.
And of course, his viewpoint was, we want these new executives to be totally powerful as Thetans, so we're going to clean up all that past track stuff. So that was, as I recall, that was the bulk of L12, was running whole track OWs, And Otto Roos was my auditor at the time. He was a class 12. I liked Otto. He was kind of a wild man, but we got along. We got along great. You didn't mess with Otto,
Yeah, that's the impression I've heard over the years. Otto was what Otto said, Otto wanted, and Otto got.
Yeah. And when he asked me, he would come into the breakfast, in the officers' lounge, and he would say, "Are you sessionable?" You didn't want to say no.
Right.
It was kind of like, yeah. I'm
oh yes, yes, sir. Ready to go, sir. Yes, right away, sir. Was L12 the only one you received while you were on the ship, or did they do all 3 on you?
All 3.
What about the other 2 then?
I don't remember a lot about them.
It's interesting because I was wondering if you were going to say that, and the reason I find it interesting is not only because of the time frame. Of course, we're talking about something that happened, 30 some odd, 40 years ago, but almost everybody I've ever talked to, even people who just got back from Flag when I was in Scientology, who had just done the L's, would actually say that exact same thing.
Huh? Interesting.
It was. I found it very interesting. Obviously it's all super confidential, and nobody expected us, I never expected any of them to tell me what the commands were or the processes or anything. But when you ask them, well, wow, how is the auditing different, or what's it all about, or what are you doing? And they kind of just go, one guy said, it's kind of like I can't recall the questions they asked me. I really don't remember a whole lot about it. But it's kind of like, he said, if somebody, and this is somebody who, of course, who was all hepped up on it and was very, very excited about the whole thing. He wasn't being critical at all.
Yeah.
He said it's kind of like, very obvious things. Like if somebody were to ask you, what's that on your nose? And you look and go, oh my God, I never realized I had that on my nose. And suddenly your whole world changes and everything is different. And, red is blue and up is down and all this. And I kind of thought, even when I was a Scientologist and a staff member, which is when this guy told me this, I thought to myself, that sounds kooky. I just thought that, I just said, man, I'm sorry, but, I didn't say any shit because I didn't want to get in trouble, but I just thought that just doesn't sound right. And, and every single person I've ever talked to, and I've probably talked to about 5 or 6 of them, have said that exact same thing. Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah. No, I for some reason, it's very forgettable,
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
exactly. And yet, we'll just have to comment on the fact that it's the most expensive auditing you can get in Scientology to this day.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay, so you joined the Sea Org. So let's kind of fast forward a little bit. When did you, because I want to talk about the Int Base. You are one of few, people who have been literally escaped from the Int Base. And life there is kind of different than it is anywhere else, you could say.
Very true, yeah.
Right. It's pretty intensive Scientology. We used to be told that not having been at the Int Base, not even knowing where it was located. But when I was a staff member and then later a Sea Org member, we were always told the international base is the place where Hubbard's words are law, where everything that happens is the most standard, most amazing, most wonderful place. Everybody goes to study. Everything is done by the book.
Except Miscavige.
Right, exactly. So, so was this the impression you had before you even went there? What was, when did you get there and what was your experience arriving like?
Well, I was a part of marketing in the marketing unit in LA, which had been an outgrowth of the Dianetics campaign. But there was about 40 of us it was called the Central Marketing Unit, CMU. And there was about 40 staff, as I recall. And the decision was made to move the entire unit to the Int Base. So we all had to.
Oh, was this before or after the Dianetics campaign?
After.
Oh, the whole Dianetics campaign happened when you were still in LA.
Absolutely. I couldn't have done it at the Int Base, believe me.
Ah, okay. All right. Let's take a step back then. I'm sorry. I was under the impression it was the other way around.
Ah, okay.
Okay, let's get back to that then, because I want to cover this Dianetics campaign from your perspective. I got Jeff's take on the Dianetic jingle and the do and all of that. How did you pull that whole thing off? Because that was, without question, that campaign was the single most successful marketing campaign Scientology has ever experienced, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. It hasn't been matched, yeah.
Yeah, and you were the guy, as far as I understand it, at the top of that whole thing. So how did, beginning to end, what was the deal with that?
There was a lot of, I guess you'd say, subterfuge involved to keep it going.
Okay, all right.
When I was still in Clearwater at Flag, I always had this dream of doing a big marketing campaign. And we used to sit around, a lot of the marketing guys at Flag, we used to sit around after hours and sort of daydream about doing a big public campaign for Scientology. It was a big dream to do this, because we were tired of marketing to the same people over and over and over again. And the same magazines going out, the same mailings going out. And we thought, God, we got to get some new blood in here somehow. We thought, God, we should do this big campaign. So that was kind of my mindset. I was sent out to LA to do a Purif campaign because there was this big TV special coming up. Kathy Lee Crosby, who was then a Scientologist, was putting on a big TV special called Get High on Yourself. And Bill Franks, who was executive director international at the time, was involved with her, I guess you'd say, personal assistant or secretary, Kathy Wasserman. And so he wanted to launch a big Purif campaign that would be set to launch when this TV special happened, this Get High on Yourself, which was an anti-drug message. So everybody got behind this. Int management got behind this. And I was sent out to LA. Was that the first? Anyway, I was sent out to LA initially. No, I was first sent out there to find a PR firm for Scientology.
Oh, interesting.
Because the GEO had just been disbanded. And, so it was like, okay, we got to handle, and Scientology's PR at the time was very bad, similar to what it is nowadays.
Right. It was really, Scientology's name was mud. I mean, they just indicted 11 Scientologists. Yeah,
exactly. And the GEO had been disbanded, and these articles were coming out. So it was like, we need a PR firm. So Annie Alcock and I were sent to LA to get a PR firm. And we reported to Bill Franks, who was ED Int, and he was at the complex. He was in the penthouse on top of Lebanon Hall.
Mm-hmm.
That was where his office was.
Huh.
So we reported to him. We would go out every day and interview PR firms. And we did that for about a month. And then finally, we recommended a firm, which ended up getting hired briefly. It wasn't Hill and Knowlton, although we did talk to Hill and Knowlton, I think. But they ended up later, years later, with Hill and Knowlton. But we had recommended a smaller firm, that was, we thought, more go-getters, more enthusiastic, that sort of thing. Which ASI used this PR firm for years. It was Bill Witter, if you've ever heard that name, but he was the PR guy. And then we got called up to Bill's office and briefed on this whole thing about how we had to come up with a campaign for the Purif, for a broad public campaign for the Purif. And so I got in touch with some Scientologists that I knew who were in the advertising field. One guy named Rick Rogers, who had worked at one point for Chiat Day, and some other people. And we did a bunch of surveys to find out people's attitude towards drugs and towards drug rehabilitation and that sort of thing, and put this campaign together fairly rapidly. And we did storyboards, a whole presentation. And then I gave that presentation to Bill Franks, who was ED Int, John Nelson, who was COCMO Int, and there was a third person. Anyway, it was those two and one other person. And I have never given a presentation like that. I may as well have been giving a presentation to department store mannequins. They didn't bat an eye or move during the entire presentation. It was just like I was talking to three dummies.
Wow.
Just nothing, just, no reaction at all. And at the end, they were like, "Thank you very much."
So did they go with it then, or?
They were fine on it, but we ended up never not going with it at all.
Oh, wow.
And this was a disappointment to me because I wanted to do a big campaign. So I wrote a petition to CMO Int, and I said, I want to do a big Dianetics campaign. And I cited all of the Hubbard things where he said this was the thing to do, was a big Dianetics campaign, And
we should be clear that at this point in time, that was basically the head of Scientology. This was before David Miscavige took over the church. You were writing to the
head guys, the top guys.
Yeah, these were the top guys running Scientology at this time.
Yeah. So, and that was approved. And what I had proposed was doing a 6-month research project to find out how to run a campaign like that. Because I knew I wasn't just going to, this whole experience with this Purif campaign, trying to put together a whole campaign in 2 weeks or whatever, I knew that was not the way to go, So I got an okay, and it was called the Marketing Research and Advertising Project when it first launched. And then that changed after a couple of months, and we became the Strategic Book Marketing Unit, SBMU. And that was me and my friend Foster Tompkins, who I think you know.
Oh, I definitely know Foster. He was, my experience with Foster was many, many, many years later when he had fallen from grace and he was running the mill.
Yeah. No, this was back in his heyday. And Foster was kind of a wild man at the time. He was not good at following orders. He would just kind of go off in all directions at once. And Bruce Wilson, another good friend of mine, who was at Flag at the time. So Bruce was running the library project at Flag and generating a lot of money. So that was going to be our money source. And then Foster and I were going to put the campaign together. So we started researching how do you put a campaign together. And I knew that it would take months of research to get to the point where I could do it with any level of certainty that I knew I was doing it right. Because I had studied a lot of marketing textbooks, a lot of advertising textbooks, because Hubbard actually said that marketing people should study marketing textbooks from the pros, which was, that was our saving grace, because we could always point to the textbook and say, well, this is what the textbook says to do. And Hubbard said to read the textbook. So in your face,
Well, yeah, because something like going off for 6 months and studying something is actually, the polar opposite of how things work in the Sea Org.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And Foster was very canny about how things worked politically. And we knew that if we called ourselves the book marketing unit, that we would instantly be run on the book sales of orgs.
Right.
And that would be our stat.
Yep.
So we said, no, let's call it the strategic book marketing unit. And when somebody tries to run us on org stats, we say, oh, no, that's tactical. We're strategic. We're planning for the future. So we had all this taped,
That was actually very smart on Foster's part.
Yeah. My mentor in a lot of this was Ken Delderfield.
Oh, okay. And he had a long history with church already. He'd been the one to put together a lot of the books that had been, all the stuff that had been done already. That was his baby.
Yeah. And he showed me how to run an entrepreneurial operation within the church.
Right.
And Foster and I were both, that was like kind of where we were at. Let's figure out how to run an entrepreneurial organization within the church that nobody can fuck with. So
it's interesting. I'll just comment right now on the fact that you have to sneak around with that kind of thing, because the whole system Hubbard set up with the week-to-week statistics and you have to count up everything on Thursday at 2 and then figure out your next week worth of production. It's all very myopic. It's totally geared toward a week to week attention span, and
it's geared to fail.
Yeah, exactly, because it doesn't allow any real there's no breathing room, there's no space to plan, there's no space to do a campaign, and like you guys were talking about, unless you got crafty about it.
Yeah, exactly. So I would issue a newsletter every week to all the executives, CMO Int and Author Services, and I would send this newsletter, and it would have the latest surveys that we completed and any information that we had found and so forth. And that kind of kept the wolves at bay, because people would read the newsletter and say, okay, they're making progress. I get it. They're making progress, So we kind of went on that way. We were ostensibly under CMO Int because we were a CMO Int project. CMO Int had no idea what we were doing. So they were not issuing any orders. Meanwhile, Author Services took a real interest in what we were doing because Hubbard got interested. They were briefing Hubbard directly on what we were doing. And he was sending messages back saying, oh, yeah, this is good. Let's keep this going, So we had unlimited air cover from ASI. And my terminal over there was Fran Harris.
Fran Harris?
Fran Harris, yeah.
No kidding. I knew Fran Harris again years later, very fallen from the top.
Yeah.
I think working on getting people to the ship or something, or doing interviews on people or something. That was where she had gotten to.
Yeah, last time I saw Franny, she was operating a guillotine in the print shop at Gold.
Yeah. Well, she was down in PAC by the time when I met her, and so she wasn't even at Gold anymore.
But Franny was a real sweetheart, and she protected us. I'll give you one example. One guy that absolutely hated what we were doing for whatever reason was Kerry Gleason, and he
Right.
and he was the CEO of what it was called, the Flag Management Organization in Clearwater, and Hubbard had sent down this whole thing about we have to figure out how to organize marketing. And so there had been this huge meeting in Clearwater, and I went to it, and a bunch of other people went to it, and some of my Scientologist friends who were in advertising went to it as well, because I thought that would be good to have a professional perspective on how to organize up marketing. So we had this huge conference. I was getting ready to leave, and Kerry Gleason called me to his office and said, "You are forbidden to leave the base until you tell me, or until you agree to be my marketing exec international." And so this would have been, God, when was this? 81, I'm thinking.
Okay.
This was before Guillaume, before Ronnie Miscavige or any of those guys. So he wanted me to, I think he had just been appointed as ED Int or something like that.
Yeah.
And he wanted me to be his marketing exec Int. And I said, well, I can't do that right now. I'm doing this campaign. And he's like, forget that campaign. That's the failed project. I'm getting you recalled, so you have to stay here and so forth. And I was like, that ain't gonna happen. So I found a friend of mine who had a car, and he drove me to the Tampa airport, and I just split,
Well, I mean, theoretically speaking, you were in a senior position to him, so.
I was under CMO Int, so he had no jurisdiction. He had absolutely no jurisdiction. Well, so I'm back in LA, proceeding with working out this campaign, and Gleason sends 2 missionaires to shut me down, basically, and they have mission orders. So they come into my office. First thing I say is, let me read your mission orders, and it's basically to take over my unit, and so forth. And I said, let me show you around the office. You get a kick out of this, right? So I show them around the office, and then I said, I go to the supply closet where we kept all of the supplies. And I said, I think you'll find this very interesting. And they go into the supply closet, I close it and lock the door.
Perfect.
And I'm hearing this bang, 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 bang. And I called Franny over at ASI, and I briefed her on what was going on. And she said, don't worry, just leave it to me, right? So I'm sitting there by the phone, just kind of, and hearing in the background, right?
Dude, that was seriously ballsy. I mean, even though they had no business walking in there and doing that, that was still.
Yeah, they were completely, out of line.
Oh, yeah.
So then I'm sitting there, 10 minutes later, Franny calls me, and she says, okay, it's been handled. Their mission has been recalled. So I went, click, click, opened up the door, right? And I said, your mission has been recalled. Now get the fuck out of my office.
Damn, dude. That was cool. That is hilarious.
But that was the air cover that I had, And
well, because you had the old man seal of approval. I mean, that was,
Yeah, that was that. So ASI didn't mess with me. They never issued orders because they recognized that we were all out of our depth with this kind of a campaign. Nobody knew what was going on. So I was finding out bit by bit. They didn't know. They couldn't issue me orders saying, you got to do this and this and this. They didn't know. And CMO had no clue what I was doing, They were just signing the checks, and that was it, So I had funding. I had complete independence. Nobody was issuing me any orders. I just did whatever the fuck I wanted, you know?
There is no one in Scientology since probably, I would say, 84, 85, who would have this kind of independence.
No.
No way.
No. Not at all.
Yeah. After Miscavige kind of tightened his fist, it was game over on anything like this ever happening.
Yeah, it was gone. So we spent months and months doing survey after survey after survey. And I hired a publishing consultant, a guy named Len Foreman, who had been, he had been the VP marketing at Simon & Schuster.
Damn.
And he knew everybody in the industry. And I went to a couple of book conventions with him, and we'd be walking down through the convention, and everybody would be going, "Hey, Lenny, hey, Lenny." He knew everybody in publishing. And so he knew the big book chains at that time were B. Dalton Bookseller and
Walden Books.
Walden Books. Those were the two biggies. And he knew everybody at those organizations. He'd been selling to them for years, so they knew him. And so he contacted his people at those companies, and he said, you know, these Scientology people are going to do a big campaign. And they were like, yeah, we've heard that before. But they said, since you're involved, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt, you know? So the big thing to do before you launch a book campaign of any kind is what's called a sell-in, which is you get agreement from the book chains, from the big book chains, from the big distributors to take a certain amount of books.
Okay.
And to display them at the point where the campaign launches. That is one of the key things that you have to do, you know? So Len was walking us through every step that you had to do to launch a campaign with the bookstores and with the, you know, and we had every outlet covered. We were dealing with Ingram's, which is the biggest book distributor in the world, and they distribute to all of the small kiosks and drugstores, and, you know, AMPMs and all that. It is handled through Ingram's, and you have to use their network and their drivers. And Len always told me, don't try to bypass them and put books in directly, which is what management wanted to do, you know, with Mission International Books and all that, was go directly to the bookstores and put books in. And Len said, no, you can't do that. He said, their truck drivers are mafia. And and he said, if they find your books in there and they haven't put them in there, they will put them in the trash.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Book mafia. Book mafia.
Yeah, the book mafia. Who knew? Who knew that this was a thing, you know?
Jesus Christ, man.
So this was Len's value. He knew everybody. He knew all the ins and outs of how everything worked. So we were able to and so I went to the meeting, and we used to have a weekly meeting with CMO execs, the exec strata execs, and David Miscavige and all the ASI people around a big conference room table.
Okay, so Miscavige was now he was now in the scene.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he was being briefed every week by us as to the progress and how to proceed. And I briefed on this whole distribution system. And I said, look, one thing we have to do is back off the orgs from putting books into bookstores. The whole Mission International Books thing. I said, that has to be stopped, and orgs have to be told not to approach walk bookstores. The order went out the next week.
Okay. Yeah. So Miscavige was listening to what you were saying.
Yeah, they were all listening, you know.
What was your impression on first meeting him and dealing with him in terms of briefings and whatnot?
At those briefings, you know, he just seemed like an okay guy. He was listening to what we had to say and would ask intelligent questions and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, it was later that I sort of got to know the rougher side of his personality,
Yeah, it's rare that you run into somebody who can talk about him. I mean, we talk about him in his later years or in the late 80s, 90s, 2000s. Okay, he's really tightened his fist, like I said, and the velvet gloves kind of come off. But in this interim period here, he's not yet totally in charge. Hubbard is still ostensibly in charge, and there are other people who are answerable and are answering to Hubbard and this sort of situation.
Yeah, exactly. So he has to maintain some decorum.
Right.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
Okay, so how did the campaign proceed then? You obviously got this great help from Lenny and figured out how to get him into the bookstore and all that.
So we had a $250,000 sell-in for the fall. This was fall 82, October 82. We were going to launch because Len said you launch book campaigns in the fall. That was one of the rules. I think it was the fall and the spring, and you had to launch the campaign then. And you had to have the books in the stores when you launched. Very important,
Well,
so
sure, you don't want to advertise a book and a person shows up and there's no books there.
And there's no books. That's a waste of time,
Right.
So we had a $250,000 book sell-in. We had the books all in the stores, and we did, I forget what our initial ad buy was, but it was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars on an ad buy. And it was too expensive to run a national ad campaign. This was back in 82. So we ended up buying spot markets where there were large
still do that.
orgs. They've gone back to doing that because they don't know how to do a national campaign anymore.
Right.
And I'll tell you how we transitioned to a national campaign in a minute.
Yeah.
So we started doing spot markets, LA, New York, Chicago. We would just pick big markets. And if we bought ad buys in those markets, then that was doable financially. We weren't spending, gazillions of bucks. We would just do, 40,000 here and 50,000 here and so forth. And so we launched our TV advertising, and it wasn't the question ads. That came later.
Oh, originally it was not that.
It was not the question ads. No, there was, and there's a whole story which I tell in my book about how we got those first ads done. One was filmed up in Ojai, and it was two mountain climbers going up a mountain. I don't know if you ever saw that one.
I'm sort of dimly recalling, but it was the question ads that I remember from even my teenage years, because that was
in the 80s.
It was very unique.
Yeah, this we filmed up in Ojai. We had a helicopter and everything. It was crazy, and it was two mountain climbers climbing up. One of them slips, and the other one has to go back and rescue them, and then they both end up at the top of the mountain with the helicopter going around them to get that sweeping shot.
Yes. I think I am remembering this. Yes.
Yeah. That was the first ad we did. And then we went out to the islands off Santa Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
And we filmed one that a woman who was an actress, but she was playing a marine biologist out there seeing the seals and everything. So we were on the island with the seals, all that. And filmed her holding the book and saying, and I recommend this book, so it's successful, intelligent person saying, read this book, So we had those two ads, and we launched, and we immediately went on to the Walden Books and the B. Dalton bestseller lists.
Okay.
And then we started climbing the list, and everybody was like, amazed that this was actually happening,
What? It's working? What?
Wow, amazing. And we were getting sales reports from Ingram's book distributor, from B. Dalton's, and from Walden Books. We would get the sales every week. And I think the first few weeks were up to like 500 books a week, which everybody thought was like over the moon, it got much bigger than that.
Yeah.
And we were starting to get on all the major bestseller lists, like it wasn't at the top, but we were on the list. We could do no wrong after that. It was like, and Hubbard was pleased as punch, of course, because his books are out there. They're on bestseller lists again after 50 years. So he's like,
extremely rare. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. So he's sending these messages down, pour on the coals, And so we've got funding, we've got whatever we want, So we just kept it going. And of course, one of the most important things is just keeping it going and keeping that momentum going, And I discovered that when we hit with those TV ads, the sales would go up, up, up for like 2 weeks and then start down.
Yep.
So I worked out the exact timing to pulse the TV ads so that the minute it started to dip, I'd pulse again. So it would go up, then it would start to dip, and I'd pulse again. And I had these buys worked out timing-wise so that they were pulsing the hits. So it would just go up higher, up higher, up higher.
And this is actually, if you were going to look at how do you do successful statistical management, let's say.
Yeah.
That's what you do. That's this business of post your graph every week and do a condition and, pray that it's out better. This is actually how you use statistics.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a good example of misapplication. It's about a year later, I launched a campaign for self-analysis.
Mm-hmm.
We did a paperback edition, small paperback, and I put together a couple of ads. And we got a good sell-in because they knew we were serious. And I'm telling you, that book took off.
Mm-hmm.
And it just took off and took off and took off. Well, so over the course of a year, the sales were going up, 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 up like this. And then after a while, they kind of topped out and started just going down infinitesimally, bit by bit by bit, right? I was in so much trouble. You can't believe it.
Really?
It's a failed campaign. Never mind that even though it was going down slightly every week, we were selling more books than we had ever sold before. Never mind that. Down was down. You can't justify that. So it would go down, 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 down. I was being ComEv'd, conditions. It was a failed campaign. We get to the end of the year, December, and it was the 11th best-selling trade paperback for that year of all the books in the U.S.
Wow.
And
Wow.
we had sold, I think, 250,000 copies.
And when was that? What year was that?
I want to say 83, 84, somewhere in there.
Okay. So still in this kind of interim period.
In this beginning period, yeah.
Where was the ComEvs and courts and justice? Where was that all coming from? Who was ordering that?
Int.
Huh. Weird.
Yeah, no, it was crazy. And I was able to quash it because, come on, just use your common sense. Nobody was going to mess with me.
Well, even within Hubbard's policies, you were covered by, I don't know if it was an extant policy at that time, but, certainly later Hubbard wrote policies, or some policies came out, if they were maybe not Hubbard, about the affluence and power conditions. And power being this thing where it goes up in a whole new range and stays there.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah.
Right.
But no, nobody wanted to hear about that. So I got in so much trouble for that campaign. And later for the Dianetics campaign, when it started to just go down, dip down a bit, forget it. Failed campaign. I was taken off post, on and on and on.
Yeah, that's where all that culty crap comes in. These people just can't think past their noses. Now, I was told, and I think I've been waiting for a long time to ask you this particular question. I was told that the question ads were filler, that there was another campaign being worked out or some other ad thing being worked out. But those were, John Goodwin, it told us this. Years and years later, he told us. Like I said, I've always wondered that there was kind of an accident. They were put together, but they weren't meant to be the campaign. And then they took off so much that, of course, then that campaign became the campaign.
Yeah.
Okay,
no.
I read it. Was that true?
No, that's
okay.
not true. I don't know where John got that idea. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he's the one who told me that.
Yeah. Yeah, this was, now we're talking 80, 85, 86. And every 6 months or so, I would launch a new campaign. And we would do a new sell-in to the bookstores, in coordination with the big chains and all that. And that was how we kept it fresh and kept it going. So I think this was 80, 85, 86. I was trying to figure out a new campaign. And I got this idea for a print ad. It was a print ad first. I had a picture of the book in the middle of the ad. And then all of these questions there were lines coming from the book with these questions like, how do you increase your self-confidence? See page 10. What's the cause of war? See page 43, There were these little lines coming out from both sides of the book. It was a print ad initially, and I thought it was pretty catchy because my rationale at the time is, let's get them to look inside the book.
Clever.
Once we get them inside the book and, that sort of thing, then we pretty much got them. So I worked this out as a print ad, and I showed it to Rick Rogers, who I was working with at the time. He was the guy that had worked for Chiat Day. He was an ad guy, very nice guy. He's still around. And I don't think he's in Scientology anymore. But he said, why don't we do this as a TV ad? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, just throw up those questions as cards, and, then reveal the book. And I said, oh, okay, I don't quite get it, but yeah, it sounds like an idea.
Okay.
So we storyboarded it out, and the storyboard was just 3 questions and then the picture of the volcano, right? And I presented it at one of our weekly meetings and said, this is a new idea that we've got. Nobody got it. They were like, that's not an ad. What are you talking about? Nobody got it, right?
Uh-huh.
So I'm talking with Rick about this. And I said, why don't we just edit it together? It's nothing to edit together. I already had the volcano graphic from an earlier ad. I said, let's just go into the editing bay and edit the thing together. And we got it, Yeah, this is in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
And TV was all glitter and glamour and color and dancing and balloons, and it was very, very frothy.
Yeah, because this is the time when graphics and digital was just kind of starting to become a thing.
Yeah, and everybody was playing with it.
Yeah, everybody was going crazy with all these stupid graphics.
Yeah, and the swirls and
that's right.
So I said, let's do the opposite. Let's make an ad that is dark and moody and tense. And I had this idea of an ad that would just be so dark and serious, to just deliberately go against what was on TV so that people would, when it came on, people would go, what's that?
Exactly.
That was my idea,
Yep.
So anyway, we cut this thing together and showed it to the execs, and they were like, oh, I get it. I get what this is all about. So then they were on board. They thought that was good, right?
Was Miscavige one of those execs at this point?
Yeah, he would have been there, okay. I'm sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So they're on board with it at this point. So, and then I start thinking about music, right? And at that time, I was into electronica, and I was listening to a group called Tangerine Dream.
Oh, I love those guys. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I talked to Jeff Levin and Chris Maney. Those were my music guys. I think I even had them over to the office, and I played the ad and hit the cassette thing so that it was playing Tangerine Dream at the same time as the ad was showing. And it was just this electronica, this. I said, that's what I want. I want that tension. I want that suspense, you know? So
yeah.
they came up with this theme, which was perfect, you know?
Right. Okay. So that's how the whole thing came together.
Yeah. So it was all thought out, you know? So it was going to be question, question, question. And it wasn't going to say what book it was. It was just going to say, see page this, see page that. And then, what's the book? Boom, Dianetics, right?
Yep.
And then I had to get an announcer to do the voices, to do the voice, right?
Right.
And I found this guy, I forget how I found him, a guy named Greg Burson, big guy. And he had a total James Earl Jones voice, deep bass voice, right? And he said, okay, what do you want? What kind of voice you want? I mean, he could do anything. He could do Daffy Duck if you wanted. And he did. He had Looney Tunes characters on his voice answering machine, you know, what's up, Doc, and all that. He did a lot of VO work for cartoons, it turns out. But I told him, I said, here's what I want. I want the voice of God.
Well, no, you know, no big deal. Just give me God.
No pressure.
Yeah,
no pressure.
Exactly.
I said, I just want God. I want the voice of God. And he did that for me, you know? Dianetics, you know, the whole.
Oh yeah, it impinges.
Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard. A fresh look at today's problems. Buy your copy at Walden Books.
We thought everything out. Even the ending, where it shows the book. I said, let's pull the book away from the screen.
Right.
Because that's going to get them to reach.
Exactly. Yep.
You know, so all of these things were going through my head, like the tension, the darkness, the voice of God booming out, you know, the book appearing and then fading away from you, you know.
Right.
It was all thought out. So then we were coming up on a new ad buy. We had to do a relaunch. And my media person, Jan Gildersleeve, who was a Scientologist at the time, she's out now, but she was very into the media scene, TV, all that. She had done work for Ron Popeil, the infomercial king.
Oh, okay.
So she knew how to buy media, and we worked together for a couple of years at that point, and she knew how I like to buy media, which is a whole nother subject. But she said, I got to tell you, there's something new. I said, what's that? And she said, it's called cable TV.
Right.
Cable had just been deregulated at that time. And nobody was buying it because it wasn't rated. You couldn't get ratings on cable at that point because Nielsen hadn't done that yet, right? So it wasn't rated. So nobody was buying it. She said, we can pick it up cheap. And I said, what are the demographics? Because I was very into that at that time. I knew exactly who the public was that we were going for because I had hired a company. This was years earlier. I had given them the largest Scientology mailing list that I could find, that I could get hold of. I had given to that. They had run it through.
How many names were on that? How many names were on that list you gave them?
Oh, I don't know, tens of thousands. You know,
tens of thousands. That was the largest Scientology mailing list you could find.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
I only put it out because it's a data point on millions of Scientology.
I can give you a ton of data points, believe me.
Yeah, I'll bet.
And more recent than that. But so I gave them this list, and they ran it through their computers, and then they spit out the demographics of that list.
Oh, wow.
Age, education level. They could figure all that out somehow. They had these magic computers and algorithms that could figure this out. And they said, okay, your people they have some college education. They're between the ages of, I think it was 24 to 35, 60% male. They had all of this. They had detailed information. So I took that demographic profile and handed it to our media companies and said, this is who I want to reach. I want to reach these people. They're male, they're this, they're that. And of course, they went completely robotic on me.
Mm.
And I would get the media buys, and it would have Saturday morning cartoons on it. And I say, I go over and meet with them. I say, listen, I don't want to talk to people who watch Saturday morning cartoons. And they say, well, it's 25 to 35, male, blah, 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 blah. I said, I don't care. I don't care. I am not interested in talking to those people, right? So then I started going through the program listings, and I would say, okay, I think I know my public pretty well. So Twilight Zone, yes, buy it. Old movies, buy it. You know, game shows, no, don't buy them. And I gave them a list of, and it was really very subjective, but it was things that I liked and that I knew most Scientologists liked, you know, which was sci-fi.
Yep.
And, you know, that sort of thing. And, you know, they're not interested in trivial stuff. You know, so I would guide them by hand picking certain types of programming, you know. So the media firm was all jammed in on this. So so Jan mentions cable, right? And I say, well, what are the demographics? I look at the demographics. It's perfect.
Yep.
Perfect demographics. And I said, good, let's do it. And she said, do you want to do a test run? And I said, no, put the whole budget into it. The whole budget. I had that much
all in, baby.
Yeah, no, I said, let's go all in. But the whole budget on cable. She said, really? I said, yeah, I'm that certain that we're doing the right thing, that, you know, I am not that worried. I said, let's go all in with the full budget and put it all on national cable. So in essence, this was the first national campaign we'd ever run, because cable was national.
Right.
So all of a sudden we had a national audience that was the correct demographic. And I'm like, do it. We're all in. And that was the first time we put the question ads on the air.
Ah, okay.
Was with that ad buy. And so we put it on the air, and the sales just went vertical. Up like this. And so we kept it going, and it just went higher and higher and higher. And by the end of, I want to say the end of 67, maybe, we were selling out of the major bookstores and distribution chain 30,000 books a week.
Oh, damn. Now, you said end of do you mean 87?
87.
87, 1987. Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Clarify that.
Yeah.
Wow. So this is huge now. These are numbers Scientology's never had before.
Right. Never. Nobody has ever sold this number of books anymore. You know? Yeah.
Damn. So that was the definition of success.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we went on all the major bestseller lists, including New York Times. Right.
That's when it hit the New York Times bestseller.
That's when it hit New York Times, was that campaign. Right. And so we just kept it going and kept it going. And changing the ads was a no-brainer. I would look at the current surveys, pick out some hot buttons, write new questions, go into the editing bay. An hour later, I'm coming out with my new ad.
Oh yeah, this is shake and bake advertising, man. This is no big deal at all to put these together.
Yeah.
How long did that go for?
That went for, well, I think it was finally killed off in 1990.
Okay, so like a 3-year campaign.
Yeah, so we went for 3 years, and it was just bang, and we were just selling books hand over foot, you know.
Wow. All right, now let's go internal for a second, because at this point you're now at the Int Base. Yeah.
Yeah, shortly after that, then we all went to the Int Base.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. By the way, I'm going to ask you about something just because we happen to cross paths in a strange sort of way. CMU operated out of Los Angeles. I went down to Los Angeles in 1987 as a brand new green staff member to train at PAC to become a course supervisor. There was a unit, there was a mission there to train up course room supervisors for the whole Western United States. And I went there, and it was a big CMO Int mission and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't know what any of this shit meant. I just was this green hotshot staff member that thought I was all the rage.
Yeah.
But here's the funny thing. I wanted to ask you about this. Do you remember a guy named Chris Martelli?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I knew Chris. Yeah.
Yeah. He became the ED of Santa Barbara because he had a baby.
Oh.
He and his wife. He tried to recruit me when I was a supervisor trainee to replace him or become a Sea Org member, so there would be a warm body to replace him in CMU.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
So we might have actually crossed paths in the hallways going to dinner.
I'm sure we did.
Back in the day. Yeah. I just think that I hadn't even known that until we were talking during this interview.
Yeah. So, no, I'm sure we did.
Yeah, Chris and his wife ended up having this darling little baby. Got shipped off to Santa Barbara because at that time the policy wasn't kick you out of the Sea Org; it was kick you out to a Class 5 org. And you're going to now run the org. And him and his wife Gail managed to hold out for I don't know, a year or two before they ended up blowing and taking off and never coming back and totally out. So anyway. Okay, so then you guys go up to gold shortly after this. What
exactly?
And now I know that Miscavige's attention must have been focused a lot on tax exemption because the church was not tax exempt yet by this point. You guys go up there. CMU now becomes an Int thing. Is that basically how that worked?
Yeah, we were directly under marketing exec Int, who was Ron Miscavige Jr.
Okay.
Was the marketing exec Int, and
Bill was it like working for him?
Huh?
What was it like working?
He was. I always liked Ronnie. He was a good guy.
Okay.
Yeah, he was not at all like his brother. He was a lot more of a straight arrow and friendly, and So I didn't have a problem with him.
Okay.
Our CO at the time was Bill Dendu. He was head of marketing for quite a while. And we had our run-ins, Bill and I.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Dianetic campaign was pretty much kaput at this point? Or was it kind of like what was happening marketing-wise at this point when you guys got there?
It was kind of limping along. And we were pretty much just repeating what had been successful.
Okay.
Going on and on.
What was life like when you got there? Did you expect it to be like it was when you arrived to Gold out in Gilman Springs and Gilman Hot Springs?
I expected it to be, like any other org I'd been in, and most recently I'd been in CMU. We were a pretty happy-go-lucky lot, generally kidding around, having a good time. So I kind of expected that. We were assigned our own table. CMU was assigned their own table in the big cafeteria at the Int Base. And I remember the first time we ate there, because we used to eat together and pack, and the jokes would fly, and everybody would just be screaming with laughter and all that. I mean, we were a lively bunch. And so we just were having our usual dinner and laughing and laughing. And then we looked around, and the whole rest of the cafeteria was utterly silent, and everybody was looking at us.
Really?
Yeah. And so that was our introduction to the seriousness of the Int Base.
Now, Mark Headley arrived around the same time, or 1990, I think he said he got there. And he said he was told almost immediately, you know, this is a place you don't fuck around. This is a place we don't, you know, David Miscavige, you run into him and it's yes, sir, no, sir, business, sir. You'd already been familiar with Miscavige from your earlier briefings and stuff. So when you got there to the Int Base, was it different now, or like what was it like?
It was a very serious place, and there was always this kind of serious pall over the whole property. You know, It was just very, very, very serious and very full of fear.
Interesting.
I mean, that's what I noticed.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting point because when you were down in LA, you know, you guys were over in your own area, and you were, you know, a very senior unit. So you were not, you know, particularly under the same kind of pressures and vagaries as the service organizations, where it's week to week, blah, blah, you know, get the public in here, and there aren't enough public in here, and oh my God, and everybody's going crazy and climbing the walls and this kind of thing. So, you know, so there was so you could be kind of in a unit where you could be a little happy-go-lucky and just get your marketing work done, because you guys weren't facing the public. You didn't have those kind of income pressures or demands.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so it was a kind of an interesting Sea Org experience as far as that goes, because because it might shock some people to hear what you were in the Sea Org and you were happy-go-lucky and joking, like what's this? And I want to make sure it's clear that you guys were kind of a unique unit in the Sea Org, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, plus we were all sort of artistic people,
right?
You know, and creative people, so we were never all that serious, you know.
Arrive to this place, you find out suddenly there's this pall of fear over the place. If I'm remembering dates and times and postings properly, you know, the three big honchos or the four big honchos that were directly under Miscavige when he took over and, you know, basically, you know, did his coup of RTC and took over, he installed Ray Midoff, Marty Rathbun, Mark Yeager, and who was IG? Anyway, this guy. Yeah, I think he's still around, but these other guys have all been busted. These guys had been busted off post by this point. I mean, they were, you know, in the doghouse. And I think he had pretty much started establishing this pattern of, you know, you're going to be on a post and it's going to be really high and you're going to have all this power until the moment you piss me off for whatever rando reason that you piss me off. And then your name is mud and you're toast and you're out shoveling shit in the lake, you know?
Yeah.
Was that, when you hit that scene and started getting familiar with what was going on there, was that kind of how it was?
Sort of, yeah. He would roam the property with his entourage.
Okay.
And corner people and, you know, threaten them or put them down or whatever he was going to do. But it was rough. You knew that if you were cornered by Miscavige and his entourage, you were going to get raked over the coals. You know?
Huh. Okay. I mean, this is, and it's the exact opposite of a productive, happy work environment. I mean, it's sort of the definition of a hostile work environment.
It was very hostile.
What was your impression of that? Did you have the idea? I mean, Hubbard's dead now. Miscavige is definitely the king. Did you think going up there and working and doing that, being in that environment, like did you ever wonder, is this how this is really supposed to be going down? Is something going to change here? Like, what was your?
Well, I can tell you my mindset, because it wasn't the first time I'd run into horrible Scientology executives.
Okay.
I had run into that in Edinburgh, in Copenhagen, people that were basically sociopathic, you know? So I had dealt with these people before. And always before they had disappeared and I had stayed. So my mindset was, they're not going to be here for the duration, but I am. So fuck you, you know?
Oh, of course. Of course.
I was kind of like, you know, this shall pass kind of a viewpoint. This is going to pass. They're going to go. I'm still going to be here after they're gone, you know?
Right. And of course, the senior driving thing. Well, let me ask you, what was the senior driving thing with you? I know what it was for me. I mean, it was helping people. It was getting myself up the bridge, hopefully at some point.
Yeah, totally.
But it was all about helping people, really, is what
it was about. Helping people. It was about expanding Scientology, you know. And I had just come off a very, very successful campaign, so I had a lot of confidence that I could make a change.
Okay.
You know, and that the work I was doing was valuable, and that I could make a change. So I was like, yeah, I'm all in. I'm all in. You know.
Yeah.
To this game, and all this noise of these people threatening others, and the Int Base, people are so rude to each other.
Really?
Everybody is rude to everybody. It's so toxic.
I should not be surprised by that, but nobody's ever said that before.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. And
elaborate on that.
There's an echelon. You have RTC at the top, then CMON, then exec strata, and then gold. Well, everybody shits on the level below them. RTC shits on CMON, CMON shits on exec strata, and everybody shits on gold. Gold is the bottom of the barrel. And then within gold, the executives shit on the lower staff members and so on. So everybody is horrible to each other. And you know about my third wife, Catherine.
Yes.
That is the reason that she became port captain, because she wanted to be, because one of the posts that she would be holding would be chaplain. And she said that she had never been in a place where people were so awful to each other. And she wanted to be the chaplain so she could mitigate that. You know?
Well, that's laudable.
Yeah. So that was
when you see her on video, she certainly doesn't come across. She comes across as an utter bitch, but that's the base. That's the base persona. You know? Okay. Well, that makes sense. So when did it become apparent to you that this idea that you were going to weather this storm, and Miscavige as the sociopath on board for now was not going away, that somehow he was actually being empowered by people around him and continue? When did that start dawning?
I'd say early 2000s, about the time that he was, habitually beating me up.
Well, yeah, that would do it.
That would do it, yeah. And I realized that two things. Number one, this wasn't going to change. The base was never going to change. It was always going to be like this. And then I would hear people talk about creating a Scientology world. And I'd say, well, that's what we have here. This is what a Scientology world would be like, and it would be horrible. And that's when I started to kind of back off from the whole scene and say, this is not what I want. This is not what I envisioned.
Yeah, exactly. Which is kind of what I ended up having the same realization 10 years later. But I've always called myself a slow learner. When you arrived to the Int Base or started living at the Int Base and started becoming familiar with the policies that only exist at the Int Base, that Hubbard wrote, or maybe Miscavige, or wherever they come from, I'm sure tons of them have Hubbard's name on them, like these team share cards, for example, that doesn't exist anywhere else. That things like that. What would you think about that?
I just thought it was ridiculous. And the thing about team share is that it would never go in the system. The team share system would never go in. And it was always this big question, why won't the team share system go in? And people would do evals and so forth. And I always felt like saying, the reason it won't go in is because it's nuts.
Yeah, exactly.
And everybody knows that it's nuts. You know?
Exactly. It reminds me of when you said that, it totally reminded me at PAC of the messing system. Because the messing system would just never go in. You were supposed to, at the mess, you're supposed to have a person who is the mess captain or the mess guy, and then you have people who are supposed to go to this weekly meeting with the people who are cooking the food and the service people, and they're supposed to coordinate and work out how the menu will be better, and all that would end up happening at the mess meeting is we would be told by the people who did the food purchasing and the food preparation, well, if the orgs aren't going to give us any money here on this base in order for us to cook you food, you can talk to us all day long about how you hate the menu and wish we had this and wish we had that, but we ain't got no money for it. And people would just come into the mess, and there wasn't enough food, and it wasn't very good food, and they'd crowd around the where the food was being served. And the system would just never go in. It would never go in. And nobody ever thought, well, maybe the system is completely screwed, right?
Right. Yeah. The obvious answer.
Yeah, it reminds me of that, What other things, the team share thing actually really surprised me when I read about that, when Mark told me that was a Hubbard thing. Because when I read about it in Mark's book, when I first read about him talking about that, I thought, that is insane. But I thought it was some kind of weird Miscavige thing. Then he tells me, oh no, this is Hubbard's idea.
It's Hubbard, yeah.
So what else was going on up there that was just kind of these weird Int Base only sort of things?
One thing was that it was almost impossible to work.
In what way?
Because, you would sit down in the morning and, you were supposed to update your graph, your 7-hour graph and your this and your that graph, and then work out your battle plan for the day.
Yeah.
Well, so you work out your battle plan, and then your senior comes over and says, okay, well, you got to do this first and that first. It changes your battle plan all around, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so those are the priorities. Good, I got it. You start working. Then the senior comes with the CO Gold.
Right.
Another inspection, right? Everything changes again, right? You're trying to work. And then the MAA comes, got to check your graphs. You got to check that you got this and you got that and you got the other thing. Okay, fine, we're done with that. Then your senior comes with the program operator. And the program operator has the program that you've got targets on, and where are these targets on your BP? Okay, they have to be put on your BP. Everything changes again. All the priorities change again. Plus, you got 3 musters a day that you have to report in. You got to do your conditions. You got to do your this. You got to do your that. And it's just exhausting. Before you've even done a lick of work, you're already exhausted. Just because you've been inspected and inspected and inspected and talked to and talked to and talked to till you're blue in the face, and everything is contradictory. None of the priorities are the same. They're all cross priorities. So you can't get anything done. And one of my shocks, I think I've told this story, but after I left the Sea Org, I went to work for a magazine in Santa Barbara called Casa Magazine. It's called Voice Magazine now. They changed the name. It used to be called Casa Magazine. And it was about a 50 to 60 page weekly magazine. And I was a production manager, which meant I was in charge of designing and laying out a 60-page magazine every single week. And I had just been at the Int Base where we had been trying to produce a 16-page brochure for the basics, what later became the basics. And that had been going on for months and months and months, and we had accumulated a huge stack of rejected brochures. And everything would just get rejected and rejected. So it was impossible to put 16 pages together. Here I was being called upon to put together a 60-page magazine every week. And it was so easy.
Right.
Because I had nobody over my shoulder. I had no inspections. I had no musters. I had nothing distracted me. I could just sit down and put the magazine together. And it was a breeze. And that was, that was a surprise to me, how much I could get done.
Yeah, I totally understand that myself.
Because that's what the base was like. It was like a constant waste of your time.
Yes. That all of that shit rolled downhill, because all of that operating, what you just said, is exactly how it was for us at management at the continental level.
I'm sure, yeah.
Exactly what you just described was my day, every day, before lunch was over.
Yes, yes.
Certainly by the time 3 o'clock rolled around, my day had been reorganized 3 times. I'd have to go to these meetings and get yelled and screamed at as well, just like I imagine you guys did too with the meeting.
Yeah.
Did you guys suffer from multiple meeting OSIS a day also? Oh,
yeah. No, it was, for a while there, we would have a meeting with COB every day. Mm-hmm. We would get called usually down to the Cine conference room about 3 o'clock, and he would go on his monologue. He would issue a bunch of orders, usually contradictory. They would conflict with each other. And then he would say, and I want this back. It was usually about a submission. He would say, and I want this back on my desk first thing in the morning. So we would work all night. If we were lucky, we'd finish before 7 a.m. And we'd have to walk it through all of the executives to get it to him. I'd have to take it to the COCMU, to the marketing exec Int. That was when the whole was happening. So I'd have to pick my way through the sleeping bodies on the floor of the CMO Int building and find marketing exec Int, and he'd have to get up and sign it off, finally take it up to the RTC building, drop it off, and then if I did that fast enough, I could take the bus out to Birthing and get an hour's sleep before I had to come back in again.
Jesus.
And then I'd come back in again, sit down at my desk, get my BPO worked out for the day, and get called for another meeting.
Right.
Which would go on until after dinner, would be a reject of whatever I'd submitted the night before, And this would go on and on. I was getting less than 6 hours sleep a night. I was getting maybe 4 or 5 hours sleep a night for months because of this schedule.
Right. Right.
Never seeing my wife,
Yeah, I got a few questions here. So first off, I got to ask, what, you say Miscavige to go off on some monologue. It doesn't surprise me at all. I'm sure he loves the sound of his own voice. What the hell did he talk about?
Oh, just random stuff. He would just go on and on about what needed to be done and so forth. And like I say, literally contradictory. He would contradict himself as to what had to be done. And everything he said would be transcribed. And we would get these huge packets, could be 20 pages of single space type, which with him just rambling. And we would have to word clear those, go through and highlight any orders, on and on and on. And they were just like insane rants and ramblings,
It's interesting to me that all of this is recorded somewhere.
Yes.
Like this is all recorded. This is all somewhere. If we can really get hold of some of this stuff, I'm sure some of it would be maybe a little incriminating.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it definitely shows that he's hands-on running the church.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mark mentioned in the video I did with him last week that Miscavige told the base a story about Tom Cruise calling a bunch of Scientology celebrities together at the CCHR museum and raking them over the coals. Do you recall that? Were you there? It might have happened after. I'm thinking it probably happened after you left.
Okay.
Because you left. What year did you leave?
2005, early.
Oh, no, that was when Mark left. Okay,
Yeah.
maybe. Okay, fine. It's not super important.
Yeah.
But when did the whole start?
That started in 2004.
Okay, so you left a year later. So and you were already kind of on your own discipline program for a lot of time there.
Oh yeah.
I
was constantly in trouble.
Yeah. What would go through your mind having to go into this place to get a submission signed or something?
I don't know. It was kind of par for the course at the time.
I figured you might say that. It was so insane.
Everything was insane. Yeah.
It was just kind of piling on more and more and more.
More and more insanity, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
The thing about, it's interesting. I get asked a lot by people who just cannot grasp how this world works, the Sea Org world works. I mean, how do you have somebody, like, I'd like you to sort of, from your own view, maybe expound on this. People have asked me, well, what do these guys do all day? You have all these people in the Sea Org and they're work. And I don't think that, it's hard to get across how much time is wasted, how much resource waste there is, how little Miscavige will utilize the resources that he has, and how he doesn't seem to really care at all. So what do you think, having spent all these years with this guy, being under him, being abused by him even, what does he want? What is his thing? What is he doing?
I think that the number one thing he wants is power.
Mm-hmm.
However, he gets that power over other people, power over the church. And he gets that in various ways, mostly by being dominating as a personality, threatening people, putting them into fear. He wants to dominate other people. He wants power over other people. However, he's going to get that. Yeah. So he's developed certain patterns of acting and dealing with people that he feels gives him power over others. So if he needs, and he feels that in order to do that, he has to be dominating, he has to be threatening, he has to, put them down constantly, insult them, that sort of thing. That's how he feels that what he feels he needs to do to get that power.
Yeah. Okay, that totally, of course, aligns with everything I've known about him and have said about him already.
Yeah.
Why do you think it is that as a group, as a subgroup, or maybe some individual hasn't just put the guy down? I mean,
that is pretty much impossible to do.
Explain.
Okay.
Because this is definitely something people do not understand.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. I have told my story many times of how he physically attacked me.
Mm-hmm.
And I told that one time to a Navy SEAL,
mm-hmm.
Very macho guy, and he said, "Oh, I would have flattened him," which is a reaction I get a lot. People saying, "Oh, well, if you tried that with me, I would have just flattened him," And I said to this guy, suppose he was an admiral.
Mm-hmm.
And he thought for a minute and he said, "Oh, I see what you mean." In other words, he's got all the power. You don't have any power.
Right.
So the minute you go against him, threaten him in any way, anything like that, number one, he has an entourage ready to pounce on you. He always travels with an entourage. So, and they're going to try to curry his favor if somebody is threatening to him, by interfering. So that's always going to happen. Number two, the minute you go against him or threaten him, you're gone.
Mm-hmm.
You're off the base. You're in the RPF, or you're offloaded. There's no gray area there. The minute that you stand up, you're gone.
Okay.
So those are the deterrents that he has, you know.
And in terms of, did you ever hear or see any indication of, again, an individual or a group ever conspiring or talking amongst themselves or trying to figure out what the hell are we going to do about this guy?
No, never.
Wow.
Again, if you had talked that way, you would have been.
Oh yeah.
Off the base.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No.
And everybody rats on everybody else.
Right.
So the minute you talk like that, somebody's going to rat you out in their next session or whenever. You know?
Right. Yeah, that's right. Because they have the e-meter and the confessionals, and people believe the e-meter works, and so they, you know, so it might as well work for all intents and purposes because they believe it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, that really is an example of reality as agreement, you know, because you got everybody there who's like in the same, you know, terror place in their head, and he controls security, and, you know, security are big guys, and
yeah. And they get you in session and they go, have you ever heard anybody speak critically of David Miscavige? There. What's that? What's that? That.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, okay, they got me.
You know? Yep. Yeah, exactly. Because you can't get out of it very easily. It's very, very difficult to do. I mean, I say that I figured out how to get sec check because I did the RPF so that I didn't have to tell all. I had to figure that out, you know?
Yeah.
And you have to step out of the mindset to a degree in order to be able to do that. You can't maintain this fantasy that, you know, everything is wonderful and Scientology is great, and then step out enough to be able to have enough to, you know, will to have some independent thought. It doesn't work that way.
I know. Yeah. Exactly.
Wow. Do you, knowing, you know, okay, so you left in 2005. I mean, obviously a lot of stuff's happened since then. Have you heard much from inside that world since you've left?
Not really. You know, the occasional person who leaves, you know, I'll have a chat with them and see if I can find out what's going on, you know?
Yeah, as we all do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems pretty sure that that life at that level is going to continue the way that it always has. I mean, you know, because
it's almost impossible to change it because it's so ingrained. You know?
Right. That's right. It's kind of like trying to, you know, you hope maybe at some point, you know, we make the comparisons to North Korea all the time. You know, maybe somebody slips a knife into Kim Jong-un at some point, but, you know, let's be real. It's pretty doubtful.
Yeah. No, it's not going to happen.
Pretty doubtful. Yeah. And of course, I say that kind of, as far as Kim Jong-un goes, he's a head of state, political figure. I mean, political assassinations happen all the time. I do not say that with any implication that I think somebody should go do that to David Miscavige. Right. You know, in his sense, it would be in a figurative sense. I don't want to see David Miscavige dead. That has nothing to do with.
No, and he would be a martyr at that point.
Exactly. So yeah, that would be pretty bad. All right, well, let me ask you this, and then maybe we'll wrap up here, because your specialty has been marketing and promotion and design and shaping and altering public perception, which is really what that's all about.
Yep.
At this point, given Going Clear, Anonymous, Leah's show, I mean, the things that have come out, the fact that Scientology's name is absolutely toxic at this point, do you think there's anything the church could do to revive their public image?
Well, I think there's always something that they can do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it was impossible when we started working on it. It was impossible to turn around public perception, but we did. And both Dianetics and Scientology, the public perception of those subjects changed during that campaign that we ran. You know,
that's true. Do you think that given its current management, that such a thing would ever happen? Do you think he'll give anybody enough leeway?
Yeah, no, nobody would ever have enough leeway to do that. Current management is David Miscavige. Everyone else has been removed.
Right.
So when you talk about current management, that's Miscavige, basically. And no, he's not going to do anything to improve the church's PR because they have no idea how to go about doing that, you know?
Right.
I mean, if I was going to run a campaign now, it would be very hard. But, you know, I do the same thing I did then. I'd sell books.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Well,
I tell you, you see little feeble attempts, these staff ads that you see on Mike Rinder's blog every couple of weeks about you can have it all and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, they're trying, but
yeah, and Advance magazine with the OT phenomena stories and all that stuff.
Right.
Which
do you? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's all.
I was just wondering. You know, this isn't talked about very often. Do you think Miscavige is smart enough to realize the situation that Scientology is actually in, or do you think he's in such a bubble world that he is clueless? I mean, do you think he knows and doesn't care, or do you think he's actually clueless about it?
I think he's relatively clueless because his default position is to blame others. So I think his default position on the whole church PR situation is to blame other people. SPs, he constantly says that he's surrounded by SPs. You know, that Jaeger and Guillaume and you know, all of those people are SPs.
Right.
The hole was originally called the SP hole because he thought they were all SPs.
Right.
And the reason why Scientology was not winning, according to his mindset, is because he was being sabotaged left, right, and center by all the SPs surrounding him at the Int Base. And that is his default position is blame. So he will go there, you know, I'm sure he knows how bad it is for Scientology now, but his default position will be, who do I blame for this, you know?
And never, of course, because he's a narcissist, he can never look in the mirror and see that it's him.
No, of course not. Never himself, because he's always doing the right thing, and everyone around him is sabotaging it.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to grasp for people who aren't narcissists or who don't understand just how deep that goes, how it's almost psychologically impossible for that person to have a self-reflection like that.
Right. Yeah, no, they can't do it. They cannot do it.
Did you ever, even on something slight or tiny, or insignificant, did you ever see him admit he was wrong?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
that's not his nature. Yeah.
No, exactly. No, it's not. But at the same time, just to comment on him a little bit more here, I'm told he's smart. He's even fairly well read in some respects. He is curious about things. I mean, I don't know. Do you think that's true?
I think he's smart is kind of a tricky word. I would maybe say canny. He's very canny. He knows how to manipulate people. You know?
Yeah, his management style certainly is pitting one group of people against another group of people, and you know, victor will rise, and that's the person he'll deal with for a little while until he gets sick of them, and then does it again.
Then they go. Yeah. The most dangerous position at the Int Base is close to COB. The higher up you get in the echelon, the more dangerous your position is. And interestingly enough, the more you accomplish, the more dangerous your position is.
Yes. Yeah. That was a lesson I learned even at the continental level was, the people who are getting annihilated are the ones who are actually producing something. You know, they stick their head up and actually get something done. Then they get promoted, and then all the guns are pointing at them. And then inevitably they end up washing dishes in the galley.
Yeah.
Or they're on the grounds crew.
It was a joke at the Int Base, I'll tell you, because we had one meeting where the whole crew was brought together, and all of the people that were in ethics trouble were put in chairs up at the front. And it was everybody who was doing anything,
Right.
who was creating anything, who was submitting anything. Those were the people at the front. Yeah.
Right. Well, the fact that that you mentioned the submission line, and the fact that it would come back over and over and over and over, arbitrary reject after arbitrary reject that really didn't amount to a hill of beans, but it's just for the sake of screwing with you guys.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of thing tells me that he could really care less about the expansion of Scientology as long as he's got his power and his John Loebs and his chef and stuff, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's what he likes, power.
Interesting. What a weird situation.
Crazy.
Yeah, well, I'm glad we all got out of it.
Yeah.
Huh. Do you think it will survive him?
Probably so. I don't know if you know Jim Beverly up in Canada.
Yes.
He's a cult expert.
Yeah, he helped put on that Toronto conference I went up to.
Yeah. I asked him one time, I said, do you think Scientology will survive? And he said, cults are almost impossible to kill.
Uh-huh.
He said, do you know that there's still a people's temple?
Yeah.
And I said, no, really? He said, no, there's still a Jim Jones People's Temple. Even after all of that happened, there is still a People's Temple. He says, you can't kill cults. They just keep going and going and going. I think Scientology will get smaller and smaller, but you know, like Jim says, I don't think you'll ever completely kill it.
Yeah, I actually agree. I do agree with that. I don't think there's going to be any spectacular burn and shredding party of all Hubbard's materials, or I don't think there's going to be some FBI raid. I don't think there's going to be, I don't think they're going to, I don't want to be defeatist. You know what I mean? There's a lot of good people working very hard to try to lessen its influence and try to get people out as well. They should as well. I work certainly for that. Sure, but I'm trying to be realistic about the fact that, nobody's going to give a care enough to take away their tax exemption, and nobody's going to, go burn Int Base down or something. It's just not very realistic,
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I always look at is that Scientology is really a big bubble.
Mm-hmm.
All of the real estate that they're buying, the empty orgs that they're building, it's all a empty bubble, really. It's all outside appearance, but the actual substance inside is next to nothing.
That's right.
And that would predict, that there could be a sudden collapse. If the facade collapsed,
yes,
then it could go very fast, because there's not really any substance there to hold anything up.
Yes.
So there could be a collapse of sorts, and I'm not sure what form that would ever take, but I think certainly if they lost their tax exemption, that would set some dominoes in motion,
I agree completely. I think catastrophic events that could happen that would actually bust that bubble would be David Miscavige being caught on video, undeniable present time evidence of actual criminal activity. I think him being escorted, perp walked out of Gold Base, I think would be the end. I think losing their tax exemption would be a major make break. I think if Tom Cruise were to leave, that could potentially start a chain reaction. But
right,
but I hold out about as much hope of Tom Cruise leaving Scientology as I do David Miscavige leaving.
I know, he's heavily indoctrinated.
Yeah, very fanatical. So
I think that if they ever had to pay full wages for their staff, that would break them. Yes,
I agree. I think that would be making them pay a living wage would definitely be a bank buster.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, Jeff, I really appreciate your time, man. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, that's a great chat. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Okay, guys. Any questions, comments, feedback, leave them in the comment section here on YouTube. I am more than happy to see those, and I'm sure Jeff might pop around and take a look at some of them too. Thanks for coming around and watching, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.